This is my background story, part 2. After 4 months out of work, I found a job that seemed less stressful. In May of 2023, I began working for the state on a new youth apprenticeship program. There were many things I enjoyed about the work, but I found working for the state again just as frustrating as when I'd worked with Child Protective Services. Change was inevitable and frustrating. I always felt like I was having to go back on my word when working with clients and potential employers, and that bothered me a lot. So in September of 2023, I moved to a position at a junior college as the career development advisor. I loved that job in so many ways. I especially loved working with students again. And I was blessed with a beautiful coworker who was so bold about her faith that it drew me in closer to Jesus as I was learning more and more about him. That job was wonderful for a while, but I'm the fix-it person, remember? I'd been hired with a specific objective, and I had set out entirely focused on completing that objective. But I was met with resistance on all sides and began to feel hindered in my ability to bring the goal to fruition. I was quickly discouraged. Somewhere between the job changes, there were 2 more totaled cars. Shawnee was at a stop sign and was sideswiped by another car that corrected from a near head-on collision, so I guess that was lucky. That car was totaled, and the other vehicle was totaled by a stampeding herd of elk, while Johnny and the kids were headed to visit a relative who was not expected to live. Thankfully, that relative did live, and everyone was okay, but boy, was it the last thing we needed. 3 totaled cars in less than 12 months. Thankfully, my grandmother gave me her little T-Bird, which I cherish. That was my commuting car. And a friend gave us an SUV with the disclaimer that it had transmission issues that hadn't been completely resolved. Thankfully, it never really had any problems. God brought provision when it seemed that there was nothing left. We kept plugging along, trying to find stability. In July of 2024, God granted me my first vision. And actually, I shared this at the beginning of the week. I had been praying for years that God let me see myself as He sees me, and on this July day, He did. I had closed my eyes and found myself standing on top of a mountain, both arms stretched out to my sides. Then it shifted, and I was in the dark with a tightness all around my body. I was in what appeared to be a cocoon. On the sides of the cocoon were all sorts of names and labels that the world gives us. Things like mom, wife, sister, employee, and other descriptors, as well as ideals I'd been trying to hold to. These seemed to symbolize all the labels that the world puts upon us, pressures of societal expectations, as well as the pressures I put upon myself. Then I noticed a crack, allowing light into the space. As I went toward the light, the cocoon broke open, and I saw the most beautiful, kaleidoscopic, colorful, yet bright white light. There was light in me, around me, shining down on me, and it was all connected. It was clear to me that this beauty in me was the Lord in me, around me, through me, upon me. He was everywhere, and it was absolutely the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Then I heard, when you take off the labels of the world, you break free to be the beautiful creation I designed you to be. Since then, butterflies have been a significant part of my journey. At the end of the summer of 2024, my bonus kid's mother refused to return them from their summer visit. We had to navigate the so-called justice system, which only proved to be so riddled with loopholes that we were unable to get anyone to enforce the custody order. To add to the issue, we had no idea what state they were in. That's a whole crazy story that I'll leave for another time, but needless to say, it added significant stress. From that point, my health continued to get worse. I began having pains from my neck that would shoot into my arms, would randomly get dizzy to where I couldn't walk. I was having vision issues that made it impossible to commute the 40 miles to work. Additionally, shingles came and went multiple times. I ended up with Epstein-Barr virus, mono, the flu, multiple other viruses and infections, severe asthma exacerbation, an increase in hemiplegic migraines, which caused stroke-like symptoms, and loss of use of half my body, and a multitude of other ailments. I had been calling out to work often or leaving early due to the illnesses. But no doctors could give clear answers about why I was so exhausted and couldn't seem to get well. They kept running the typical labs and finding average results. Remember that wonderful psychiatrist? She's the only one who went above the bare minimum in an effort to identify what could help me get well. In the end, she's the one who told me about burnout. I'd always heard the term used in reference to being overwhelmed. She explained that it was, but it was more than that. My body was struggling in all these ways because it had been functioning in a heightened state for an extended period of time. Very extended in my case. I'd argued that I'd taken time off and engaged in all the self care things, but it never seemed to make a dent in the way I felt. She went on to explain that the process of healing this severity of burnout was lengthy, not done with some vacation or self care. This was something that would require years to resolve. While this didn't necessarily feel encouraging, it validated everything I was experiencing. Other doctors simply said to reduce stress. She gave me reality. By October of 2024, after all of the health issues, I was out of leave and not getting better. So I had no choice but to quit my job. We decided that Johnny would find work and I would be able to stay home and focus on healing. Unfortunately, work was hard to find, and we found ourselves facing inevitable homelessness. We began seeking opportunities elsewhere. Johnny lined up work and we prepared to get moved. We bounced around a variety of ideas for how to move what we needed in the SUV and the T-Bird and finally thought we had it figured out. Then, 3 days before we were planning to move, the transmission of the SUV quit working. Go figure. Here we were, 2 adults, a toddler, 4 dogs, and a two-seater car, trying to sort out how to move across the country with only a few $100s to our name. Thankfully, God worked through some amazing friends who went through their own insanity while bringing us a trailer to help us move. The little one rode with them and was happy as a clam, though he had just met them. That was pretty amazing. We packed what we could in the trailer, leaving room for the dogs, and we set out on a whole new adventure. It was chaos, but God was providing and protecting all along the way. There are so many things I would do differently if I could, but at the time, with all the things we were facing, we did the best we knew how. So I've been in this new state since October. No, excuse me. I've been in this new state since November of 2024. It's quieter, slower, calmer, and absolutely beautiful. Johnny has family here, which helps a lot. I began to find calm and healing again. Most of my symptoms subsided, except for the issues with my neck. Oh yeah, I forgot about that part. In all of my crazy medical stuff before the move, I'd seen a specialist and discovered that the car accident and whiplash had caused spinal stenosis in my neck, and that has continued to cause various issues. It's not always severe, but if I have any increased tension in my neck, it wreaks havoc on my body with nerve pain, dizziness, and headaches. In December of 2024, shortly after Christmas, we were finally able to get a criminal case against my bonus kid's mother. Johnny drove to that state in order to be on site for law enforcement to give him his kids. When they arrived to arrest the mother, her best friend took off with the kids. After a few hours of a multi-agency search, the boys were found and returned to Johnny, and he brought them home. That brought new challenges. While I'd been able to find a sense of calm and order, their return brought a new chaos. They showed significant regression in education, behavior, and communication from the time they left for the summer visit. We were investigated again by Child Protective Services after their mother posted on her social media accounts urging people to call and report Johnny for anything they could think of. Law enforcement came to visit us a couple times for welfare checks called in by their mom. I had to get IEPs transferred from the last school, explain the gap in education, and work with the new district to develop new IEPs. The court case was slow moving, and their mother ended up taking a guilty plea in March of this year. Again, lots more to that story, but I'm not going into that here. Point is, the stressors in life have continued, so healing has been slow, but still forward moving. Last summer, we went through a period of semi-homelessness again. We had a place to stay, but it would not work once winter came. That was actually one of the most peaceful seasons of my life. I learned to trust God more. I read books, listened to podcasts, and joined all sorts of challenge groups, seeking new depth of relationship with God and new understanding of how to trust Him more in my life. I learned one way that God speaks to me and began praying more regularly and more specifically. I worked for a few months, but was laid off. However, that job led me to finding an affordable place to live. Again, God provided for all our needs. Over and over, I have seen it happen. Every struggle has brought breakthrough, new depth of relationship, and extra bits of wisdom to help others along their journey. In September of 2025, I began a program called Prophetic Heart Healing, which I'm still working through. Because we have to experience the sessions and practice with each other, I've had the blessing of finding new healing quite regularly. I have learned more how to hear from the Lord, have received multiple visions for myself and for others, have learned to listen carefully for what he is saying to others, and have developed a stronger love for Jesus than I've ever known. He has brought healing into deep wounds, redeemed painful memories by revealing himself in those moments, and has shown me so many beautiful things about myself. I went from being skeptical about those who gave prophetic words to living in an environment in which the prophetic is honed. I have learned that God cannot be put into a box. I have seen him do the most incredible work in people, bringing healing in ways I'd never have imagined. And I've learned that he speaks constantly. We just have to learn how to listen. This has brought a depth of relationship with Jesus that truly rivals that of those closest to me in life. I found myself more capable of managing stress and balancing all the responsibilities in life. I have a peace I've never known and a place to go when I'm struggling. Jesus has been here through every single step. And yet, my body was still responding out of burnout. I was quickly overstimulated and overwhelmed. My mind typically had like 50 things happening at once, so any outside stimulus was one thing too many. That's when I found out about TRE and the Crossing the Threshold retreat. So this is where my story ends for today. Come back tomorrow for the rest of the experience, a little more of my testimony, and to see how beautifully that vision I shared earlier ties in.